Before we drift into tonight's story, take a moment to settle in. Let your shoulders loosen, let your breath slow, and let the day fade softly behind you. If you enjoy these calm nighttime journeys through forgotten ages and old myths, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps the channel grow, and it lets me bring you more gentle stories to fall asleep to. Tonight's tale begins long before heroes, before temples, before even the first whisper of wind across the world. It begins in a place where silence was the only ruler. A silence so deep and steady that it felt almost warm, almost alive. And within that stillness, something ancient began to stir. Before mountains rose or oceans breathed, before the sky found its color, there was only chaos. Not a roar of confusion, but a vast, tranquil darkness, like a quiet room with no walls. Time had not yet learned to move. Nothing rushed, nothing ended. Everything simply rested. From this endless calm emerged the first presence, Gaia, the earth. Imagine her as a gentle foundation forming beneath your feet, patient and comforting, spreading softly through the quiet. Soon after came Uranus, the sky, settling above her like a calm blue dome. There was no thunder, no lightning, only the slow meeting of two ancient beings who gave shape to the world without ever disturbing its peace. Their union brought forth the Titans, beings so immense and steady that they seemed carved from the rhythm of time itself. They lived not in moments, but in eras. Their movements were slow, patient, and inevitable, like mountains shifting over thousands of years. Among them was Cronus, who carried a quiet watchfulness in the core of his being. He feared change the way some fear waking from a dream, slowly, silently, but persistently. And as the ages drifted by, that fear grew. Eventually, Cronus rose against his father Uranus, not with a violent storm, but with the steady certainty of dusk replacing daylight. The world dimmed, then settled into a new calm. Cronus claimed the throne of creation, guiding the cosmos with deliberate, measured hands. But a prophecy soon rested heavily on him. One of his own children would someday overthrow him. Fear crept into his mind like a soft shadow along the edges of a room. And in that fear, Cronus swallowed each newborn child, not in rage, but with an anxious, slow determination. Rhea, his wife, moved through the halls like a faded light, burdened by loss, yet holding on to a thin, unwavering thread of hope. When she bore for youngest, she could no longer accept the pattern. She hid the baby away on a distant island, warm with gentle breezes and soft moss underfoot. The child was named Zeus. He grew in silence and safety, surrounded by nymphs who soothed him with stories of the world he had never seen. He learned the language of the wind, the pulse of the earth beneath him, and the patient strength he would one day need. Every day made him stronger, not with loud triumphs, but with the quiet wisdom that fills a soul over time. And now, as this first part closes, the world seems to hold a breath once more.
Cronus sits unaware on his heavy throne. Rhea waits in the shadows of fate, and Zeus, nearly grown, takes his first calm steps toward a destiny that has been patiently waiting since the universe first opened its eyes.
Far from the throne of Cronus, on the quiet, mist-softened island where Rhea hid her youngest child, time drifted with gentle patience. The days did not rush. The nights arrived like warm blankets laid over the sky. And in this peaceful cradle of nature, Zeus grew in silence, learning the world not through kings or laws, but through the steady rhythms of wind, stone, and sea. The nymphs who raised him tended to his childhood with a tenderness the Titans had forgotten. They spoke in low voices and moved with slow grace, as though they feared to wake the sleeping world around them. At night, they told him stories, not of battles or conquests, but of the quiet beginnings of the earth, of the first soft rays of sunlight, of rivers that learned to flow and stars that learned to glow. Zeus listened with his eyes half closed, absorbing not only their words, but the calm behind them. Each tale wove itself into him like threads of steady silk. He grew strong, but not noisy, curious, but not reckless. His power ripened the way fruit does under patient hands, slowly and naturally, without ever straining toward the future. Yet outside the hidden island, the world moved in uneasy stillness. Cronus sat on his throne, watching the edges of time with anxious suspicion, unaware that the sun he believed swallowed was breathing freely beneath distant skies. His reign was quiet, but it was a quiet shaped by fear, a stillness that trembles slightly if you listen long enough. Rhea, meanwhile, carried her secret like a soft flame cupped between trembling fingers. Each time she saw Cronus, she kept her face calm, her voice steady, her heart silent. No Titan suspected that the prophecy was already awakening on a secluded shore. As Zeus neared adulthood, the island itself seemed to sense the shift. The winds grew more deliberate. The waves rose and fell with a deeper rhythm. The trees leaned toward him, as though acknowledging the presence of someone meant for more than hiding. And Zeus, who had spent his life in gentle observation, began to feel a quiet stirring within him. Not ambition, but a knowing, a certainty that the world beyond the horizon was waiting. One evening, as dusk blended into the soft blues of twilight, the nymph who had been closest to him came to sit by his side. She spoke in a calm voice, yet her words carried purpose. "The time has come," she said, brushing moss from her hands. "You were hidden so that you could grow without fear. But the world beyond needs you now. It has grown heavy with the silence of your father's rule." Zeus listened, letting her words drift into him like settling dust. He did not speak immediately. He watched the horizon darken and considered the vastness beyond it, a world shaped by Titans, bound by prophecy, waiting for change. Rhea arrived soon after, cloaked in moonlight. She had traveled in secrecy, guided by hope and guarded by the ancient forces that still whispered through the earth. When she saw her son, now tall and steady, her heart trembled with both pride and sorrow. She approached him with slow steps, as though the moment might dissolve if she hurried. "My child," she said gently, "the time has come for you to face your father." Zeus rose, not with haste, but with the calm certainty that had defined his life. He embraced Rhea, feeling the long years of her hidden grief resting in the space between them. She explained the truth, the swallowed siblings, the prophecy, the fragile balance of the world under Cronus's anxious hand. Zeus listened, his expression soft but resolute. "I will not act in anger," he said finally, his voice steady as a distant tide. "But I will act." Rhea nodded, knowing he understood the weight of destiny without being consumed by it. She reached into her cloak and brought out a small vial, filled with a shimmering mixture crafted by Earth herself, a potion that would force Cronus to release the children he had taken. "Take this," she whispered, "and free what fear had devoured." And so, as the moon climbed slowly into the sky, Zeus prepared to leave the island that had sheltered him for so long. The winds shifted around him, the sea grew still. Even the stars seemed to watch. The hidden son of the world was finally ready to step into the open. Zeus left the island at dawn, when the world was wrapped in that soft, uncertain light that lies between night and day. The air was cool against his skin, carrying the familiar scent of sea salt and moss. But now it felt different, as if the island itself were gently nudging him forward, urging him toward the path he was meant to take. The nymphs watched from the shadows of the trees, their faces calm, though their eyes shone with the weight of farewell. He stepped into a small boat fashioned from smooth wood, worn by years of ocean breath. The waves did not crash or protest. They simply lifted the vessel and guided it outward, toward the wide, open world he had only heard of in whispered stories. Each gentle rise and fall carried him farther from the hidden childhood that had sheltered him. The sea was slow and steady, like a heartbeat. As Zeus traveled, the world seemed to shift subtly around him. Clouds drifted overhead in long, stretched shapes, almost as if they recognized him. Birds circled quietly, their wings cutting arcs through the morning sky. Even the wind adjusted its course, brushing his shoulders in a gesture that felt almost like a welcome. By midday, Zeus reached the mainland, a place of towering cliffs and ancient valleys carved long before memory began. He stepped onto the land with deliberate calm, letting his feet sink into the earth's warmth. Gaia herself seemed to hum beneath him, the low vibration of a mother greeting a long-awaited child. It was faint, but unmistakable. Rhea, waiting in a grove nearby, approached him with slow steps. She had traveled in silence, keeping to hidden paths where shadows drifted gently across the ground. When she saw Zeus standing tall among the trees, illuminated by beams of filtered sunlight, she felt the quiet certainty of fate settling fully into place. "You have grown into strength," she murmured, her voice low and warm. "Not the violent strength of the Titans, but the patient strength the world needs." Zeus bowed his head slightly, not out of reverence, but out of understanding. "Show me the way," he said. Rhea led him through a forest where leaves whispered their secrets as the pair moved past. The air smelled of pine resin and earth, thick and comforting. They walked without hurry, allowing the natural rhythm of the land to guide them. Zeus listened to every sound, the distant call of a hawk, the rustle of creatures beneath the foliage. even the faint rumble of mountains that had watched centuries rise and fall. Finally, they reached the edges of Cronus's domain, a place where the world felt still, as though holding its breath. The land here bore the quiet weight of the Titan's fear. Rivers flowed more slowly. The sky seemed dimmer. Time itself moved reluctantly, like a tired traveler unsure of the road ahead. Inside a great hall carved from stone and shadow, Cronus sat on his throne. His eyes were half closed, not in rest, but in restless worry. He sensed something in the air, a shift, a tremor, a change beginning somewhere beyond the horizon. He could not name it yet, but it made him uneasy. Rhea placed a gentle hand on Zeus's arm, grounding him in the moment. "You will confront him," she said softly. "But remember, destiny does not need force, only truth." Zeus nodded, feeling the quiet power coil within him, not explosive, but steady, like a storm gathering its patience. Together, they stepped into the hall. The shadows stretched across the stone floor as if eager to witness what would unfold. Cronus opened his eyes. For a heartbeat, neither father nor son spoke. They simply watched one another, the silence between them heavy and slow. Zeus bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the Titan not as an enemy, but as a necessary step in the long arc of time. Cronus frowned, a single crease forming across his ancient brow. "You," he murmured, voice deep and uncertain, "you are not meant to be." Zeus met his gaze with calm certainty. "Yet I am." The words hung in the air like a soft bell tone, resonant and unhurried. The hall trembled with a low, rolling sound, as if the ancient stones themselves were awakening from a long slumber. Cronus gripped the sides of his throne, his face twisting not in anger, but in a deep, slow shock, the kind that grows from a truth long avoided. The potion Rhea had given him, born from the oldest roots of the earth, began its quiet work. Zeus stood steady, watching with the calm patience that had shaped his life. He felt the air shift, warm and alive, as though the world were exhaling after ages of held breath. Rhea stepped beside him, her expression a blend of sorrow and relief. This moment had lived inside her for centuries, buried under fear, carried through silence, nourished only by hope. Cronus shuddered, and from deep within him came a strange glow, soft at first, then brighter, spreading through his tightened frame like distant dawn. He leaned forward, breath heavy, and then, with a sudden release, the first child emerged in a swirl of shimmering light. Hestia, gentle and warm as a hearth flame, unfolded into the room like a sigh of comfort. Her presence filled the hall with a soft, steady warmth, as if a home long abandoned had been lit again. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the world outside her father's shadow. Another tremor moved through Cronus, and the second child appeared, Demeter, calm and grounded, hair flowing like ripened fields ready for harvest. Even in the dim hall, she seemed to carry the promise of growth, of abundance waiting for a chance to return. Then came Hera, regal even in confusion, her presence measured and dignified. A quiet strength radiated from her, the kind that stands firm in storms, unshaken and resolute. Cronus gasped, the potion continuing its gentle but unstoppable work. With a heavy rolling motion, Hades emerged next, cloaked in a stillness deeper than any shadow in the hall. His eyes carried the quiet of cavern depths and the patient inevitability of endings that do not frighten, only wait. Finally, the last light surged upward. It spiraled around Cronus in a slow coil before settling into form. From it stepped Poseidon, bearing the calm but immense pressure of the ocean depths, a presence both soothing and unfathomably strong. One by one, Zeus's siblings stood before him, blinking into the dim hall with expressions of awe and disorientation. They had been trapped for so long, swallowed before they could speak, hidden in the dark belly of fear. Now they stood free, breathing air that felt new, even though the world itself was ancient. The 6 siblings gathered near Zeus, instinctively drawing toward the brother who had freed them. They sensed him not as a stranger, but as a center, a steady presence that felt familiar, even though they had never met him in the waking world. Cronus slumped backward on his throne, exhausted, the glow fading from his form. For the first time in ages, silence returned to the hall. But it was no longer the tense silence of fear. This was the hush that follows release, a space momentarily emptied, waiting to be reshaped. Rhea stepped forward, her footsteps soft but strong. She looked upon the children she had lost and found again. Her eyes shone with tears she had kept hidden in her heart for centuries. When she reached them, she extended her hands, and each child touched her in turn, recognizing the warmth that had been denied to them. Zeus spoke then, his voice calm and low. The world needs more than one spirit to guide it. It needs balance. His siblings listened, their newly freed hearts absorbing every word. They felt the truth of it, the way roots feel the truth of rain. The age of Titans, Zeus continued, was shaped by fear and caution, but now a new order can rise, one shaped by steadiness, purpose, and harmony. Hera lifted her chin slightly, regal even in the quiet moment. You freed us, but what comes next? Zeus breathed slowly. Now we must stand together. At the far end of the hall, Cronus stirred. Shadows shifted around him. Though weakened, the Titan still held the weight of ages within him. He looked at Zeus not with rage, but with an ancient, weary fear. A father knowing his time was ending. Yet Zeus did not approach him with triumph. He stepped forward with the grace of someone who understands that destiny can be fulfilled without cruelty. Your time shaped the world, Zeus said gently, but all things must change. Cronus lowered his gaze. For the first time, he did not resist. Outside, distant thunder gathered, not violent, but heavy with meaning. The world was preparing for something new, something long awaited.
The hall where the 6 siblings stood seemed to breathe again, as though relieved that truths long buried had finally risen into the open. But outside its stone walls, the world shifted with a subtle unease. The Titans sensed the change, a tremor in the order they had known for eons, a ripple in the calm sea of their rule. Though Zeus and his siblings had no wish to bring chaos, destiny rarely moves without stirring deeper currents. Zeus approached his brothers and sisters, letting his gaze rest on each of them in turn. They had only just emerged from darkness, yet there was something steady and ancient in their eyes, as though their spirits had been waiting fully formed, ready for the world the moment they were released. Zeus said, "We cannot stay here. Cronus will not sit idle, and the Titans loyal to him will see us as a threat." Poseidon stepped closer, his presence shifting like a deep tide before a storm. "Where do we go?" Zeus answered, "To the earth's roots, where the old powers still breathe." Rhea, still standing near Cronus's throne, turned toward her children. Her expression held both pride and lingering sorrow. "Seek the Cyclops," she said, her voice soft but sure. "They are ancient craftsmen of thunder, lightning, and fire. Your father imprisoned them long ago, fearing their gifts. Free them, and they will arm you with what you need." The siblings listened with quiet attention. Even Hades, who spoke little and watched much, seemed to understand the weight of her words. Zeus approached Rhea and touched her hand gently. It was the softest gesture, but it carried gratitude centuries deep. "We will return," he promised her, "when the world is ready to change." The siblings left the hall together, moving through the forested slopes in a slow, unified stride. The sky hung low, colored by muted grays and golds, as though the heavens were quietly watching the first steps toward a new age. No winds howled, no birds cried. The world held its breath again, waiting. As they walked, the land changed around them. The trees grew older, their trunks thick and twisted with wisdom. The air cooled, heavy with the scent of stone and rain. Hestia paused occasionally to touch the bark of ancient oaks, feeling the warmth of life pulsing beneath. Demeter brushed her fingers across moss and new shoots, guiding the faint glow of growth that followed her wherever she stepped.
Hera observed everything with calm calculation, noting the patterns of the land, the movements of distant clouds, the way the earth itself seemed to shift in anticipation. Poseidon moved with quiet strength, each footstep echoing the pressure of unseen tides. Hades kept to the edges, silent but attentive, his presence like a shadow cast not by darkness, but by depth. Zeus led them with the steady confidence of someone who does not rush toward fate, but walks into it as though it were a familiar doorway. After many hours, the siblings reached a vast chasm, a break in the world that descended into an abyss older than the Titans themselves. Warm air rose from its depths, carrying the scent of metal, stone, and ancient fire. This was the entrance to Tartarus, the place where Cronus had cast the Cyclops in fear of their power. Demeter stepped closer to the edge, peering into the glowing dark. "How do we reach them?" she asked softly. Zeus knelt, placing his palm against the rocky ground. The earth hummed beneath him, a low, patient vibration that traveled into his bones. He said, "We ask." Hestia and Demeter joined him, adding their warmth and life to the gesture. Poseidon rested his trident-shaped aura against the stone. Hera laid her steadying hand upon Zeus's shoulder. Even Hades closed his eyes, offering his quiet gravity.
Together, their powers formed a gentle pulse, not a strike, not a demand, but a call. The underworld answered. The chasm widened with a long, drawn-out sigh, revealing a path descending into shimmering darkness. It was warm, lit by fires that burned without flames, glowing in steady waves like molten gold. The siblings stepped forward as one, their silhouettes cast against the ancient light. As they descended, the air grew denser, not with menace, but with the weight of forgotten ages. Sparks floated upward from unseen forges. The walls glowed with runes carved long before Cronus took the throne. Finally, they entered a vast chamber that stretched far beyond sight. At its center stood the three Cyclops, towering figures of stone and fire, each with a single luminous eye that glowed like a furnace. The first Cyclops turned toward Zeus, studying him with deep, slow consideration. "You have come for the tools of gods," he rumbled, voice echoing across the chamber. Zeus met his gaze evenly. "I have come to set right what fear has broken." A long silence followed, thick, warm, and full of possibility. Then the Cyclops bowed, and the world shifted again.
The Cyclops, standing tall and silent, radiated an aura that was both ancient and patient. Their single eyes glowed steadily, like the steady flame of a forge untouched by wind. Each breath they drew seemed to stir the very air around them, moving slowly, rhythmically, as though the heartbeat of the world itself were reflected in their chests. Zeus and his siblings stepped forward together, careful not to disturb the quiet majesty of these beings, yet unafraid. "You have been kept here," Zeus said, his voice low and deliberate, "for centuries. Cronus feared your power, but the world now needs it, and we will see it restored." The largest Cyclops, whose skin shimmered like cooled lava, let out a slow, rumbling sigh. "It is true," he said. "We have waited. The hands that once imprisoned us were born of fear, not need. And the fear is no longer what drives this place." The siblings stood in a soft circle, feeling the faint hum of the Cyclops' presence resonate with their own energies. Hestia's warmth intertwined with the simmering fires. Demeter's life force softened the blow. Hera's poise steadied it. Poseidon's depth anchored it. And Hades' quiet gravity drew it into a dense, controlled pulse. Zeus absorbed it all, letting the rhythm guide his thoughts and steady his resolve. The Cyclops moved with deliberate grace, their massive hands shaping forges that had lain dormant for countless ages. Sparks floated upward in slow arcs, curling like the tails of fireflies across a shadowed night. In these sparks, tools of immense power began to form. Hammers, shields, tridents, and even bolts that seemed to contain the concentrated brilliance of a captured storm. "These are the instruments of balance," the second Cyclops intoned, his voice echoing like the distant roll of an ocean swell. "They are not weapons of hatred, but of order. Only those with patience and purpose may wield them. Zeus stepped forward, feeling the faint vibration of power humming through the ground into his bare feet. He extended a hand, and the Cyclops offered the first gifts. A bolt of lightning floated into his palm, warm and alive, not harsh, not aggressive, but full of potential energy, waiting for careful guidance. He held it, sensing the raw patience of the storm, its slow charge of power that could erupt in brilliance at the right moment. Poseidon accepted a trident, the tip still radiating the dense pressure of ocean tides. Its weight was immense, but not burdensome. He felt the slow pulse of water, currents stretching across seas, centuries of motion, all folded into this single instrument. Hades received a helm, dark and cool to the touch, yet humming with quiet authority. It was the essence of shadows and endings, not fearsome, but inevitable, a guide for things that must come to rest, a steady anchor in times of flux. Hestia received a simple flame, small but unyielding, which could grow to soothe, warm, or illuminate as needed. Demeter's gift was a staff entwined with seeds and leaves, carrying the slow, quiet force of growth itself. Hera's gift was subtle yet potent, a mirror-like shield that reflected not just light, but wisdom and insight, the kind that guides rulers without haste. Zeus gathered his siblings together and looked at the Cyclops with gratitude. Your patience has given us what we need. The world will not be shaped by anger, but by steady hands. The Cyclops nodded slowly, their single eyes glimmering like molten metal in the dim chamber. Then, without haste, they stepped back, letting the siblings move toward the exit that led to the surface. The path back was quiet, unhurried, as though the very world was supporting their journey. Once outside, the siblings looked at each other. For the first time in centuries, they felt united not just in purpose, but in understanding. They carried tools of immense power, yes, but they also carried the knowledge that the strength of gods is measured in patience and calm, not haste or pride. Zeus raised his hands slightly, letting the lightning spark softly in his palm, not as a threat, but as a reminder of the responsibility they now bore. The Titans will not wait idly, he said, but neither shall we. The time of change is approaching, and we must meet it with quiet certainty. The sky above the horizon shifted gently, clouds moving in long, slow folds. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as if listening to the subtle heartbeat of destiny gathering below. And so, armed with patience, wisdom, and the quiet force of ancient power, Zeus and his siblings began the journey toward the inevitable confrontation, a battle that would not roar, but unfold steadily, like centuries settling into their proper place.
The siblings emerged from the deep chasm into the calm of the world above. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long, gentle shadows across the land. Each step they took was deliberate, measured, as though even the ground beneath them understood that haste was unnecessary. This was not a moment for prideful urgency. It was a moment for preparation, for alignment, for patience. Zeus turned toward his brothers and sisters, his gaze calm but steady. "We will need allies," he said softly, "not for conquest, but to restore balance. Some of the Titans still linger, loyal to fear rather than justice. Others are lost to the old ways, unwilling to change. We must meet them with care." Poseidon's eyes, deep as the seas themselves, scanned the distant horizon. "The oceans carry many creatures," he murmured. "Some will heed the call of order, some may resist. We cannot rush them. They must choose for themselves." Hades' quiet voice finally spoke, low and measured. "Even shadows can guide. Those who dwell in forgotten places may provide insight. Their understanding is slow, deliberate, and can be more powerful than force." Demeter's gaze swept across forests and fields, her hands brushing lightly over the tips of grasses and leaves. "The land itself will respond. Life grows patiently, and even in times of turmoil, it seeks harmony. We must listen to it, as we have listened to the Cyclops. The earth is our ally if we honor it." Hestia's warmth radiated softly, filling the group with calm reassurance. "And the people," she whispered, "those who dwell in the mortal realms may not see the battles we face, but their hearts can guide us if we offer steadiness and protection rather than fear." Hera, ever poised and measured, nodded slowly. "Allies are chosen not in haste, but in understanding. We must discern who aligns with the principles of balance. Patience will reveal them." And so, together, they began their journey across mountains, forests, and rivers, moving not with urgency, but with a deliberate rhythm. The land seemed to respond to their presence, subtle yet perceptible. Trees leaned slightly as they passed, rivers flowed a touch smoother, and even the wind carried a softer tone, as though nature itself recognized the beginning of a shift in power. Along the way, the siblings encountered beings long forgotten. Dryads, hidden in their trees, emerged slowly, watching with cautious curiosity. Nymphs of streams and valleys whispered questions in gentle tones, their movements careful, as though afraid of startling the future. Each encounter was met with patience, each word measured, each gesture mindful. The siblings extended calm reassurance rather than demand. In the distant hills, they met a group of giants who had once followed the Titans blindly. At first, the giants' presence was imposing, their size alone a reminder of ancient power. But Zeus approached slowly, the lightning in his hand dimmed to a soft pulse, and spoke not of domination, but of truth. The world changes. It can be reshaped without destruction. Follow us if you wish, or remain in your old ways. The choice is yours. The giants paused. Their breaths came deep and slow, matching the rhythm of the siblings' calm resolve. One by one they nodded, not out of fear, but from a dawning understanding. Their allegiance was offered quietly, thoughtfully, a testament to the strength of guidance born of patience rather than command. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with muted shades of orange and violet, the group reached a valley where whispers of forgotten magic hung in the air. Here, Zeus sensed the presence of even more allies waiting quietly, spirits, mortals, and creatures who had grown tired of living under fear. They would join, not in haste, not for battle's sake alone, but because they understood the need for measured change. Zeus turned to his siblings, his expression calm but resolute. "The time draws near," he said softly. "Soon we will face the Titans who resist, but we face them not with anger, not with haste, but with purpose and patience. That is our strength." The siblings moved forward, their steps measured, their hearts aligned, carrying with them the quiet certainty of destiny. Not the loud certainty of conquest, but the deep, enduring assurance of those who act in harmony with the world itself. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, and with each step, the future of gods and mortals alike grew nearer, moving at the patient rhythm of time itself.
As Zeus and his siblings continued their journey, the air seemed to shift in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. The earth itself hummed beneath their feet, as though sensing the approach of something monumental. Yet the world did not tremble. There were no storms, no shouts, no clashing of arms, only a slow, deliberate movement, like tides drawing quietly against distant shores. This was the calm before confrontation, a silence charged with purpose rather than fear. The siblings moved as one, their steps synchronized with the rhythm of the land. Hestia's warmth spread softly through the group, a reminder of steadiness and home. Demeter's gentle life force nourished the surrounding forests and fields, leaving behind trails of subtle growth and quiet green whispers. Hera's gaze swept over the horizon with measured precision, noting every hill and valley, every shadow where the unseen might linger. Poseidon's presence tugged at hidden rivers and streams, gently stirring currents that had lain dormant for years. Hades, ever patient, kept watch over the unseen paths beneath their feet, a sentinel of calm inevitability. Zeus led with quiet authority, his lightning dormant but alive in his hand, pulsing with the slow rhythm of potential. He did not speak of power or war. He spoke only when necessary, letting his presence guide his siblings like the steady pulse of a heartbeat. Every word was soft, deliberate, carrying weight without urgency. As they approached the plains where the first confrontation with the Titans would unfold, the landscape seemed to recognize them. The grasses leaned slightly in the direction of their passage. Trees shifted their canopies, casting shadows that moved gently with the rhythm of the wind. Even the distant mountains appeared to bow, their peaks shrouded in mist, as though acknowledging the coming change. Along the way, the siblings encountered mortals who had long felt the weight of fear pressing upon their lives. Villagers, farmers, and wandering travelers watched silently as the divine procession passed. None spoke aloud, yet all sensed the quiet certainty that accompanied these gods, a reassurance that the world was moving toward balance, that change would come not through chaos, but through measured, deliberate action. The first of the resistant Titans arrived not with a roar, but with cautious observation. Oceanus, guardian of waters, watched from a distant hill, his vast form folded into the mists. Cuius lingered among the rocks and crags, his eyes reflecting thought rather than anger. Creus moved silently through valleys, feeling the pulse of the earth without disturbing it. They approached slowly, aware of the siblings' measured pace. Zeus raised a hand in a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. He said, "We do not come to destroy. We come to restore balance, to offer a new order built not on fear, but on understanding and harmony." The Titans paused, the weight of centuries pressing on them. For a long moment there was only stillness, the kind that fills the space before rain begins to fall, or before waves quietly reach the shore. And then, slowly, the Titans began to respond. Oceanus's vast form relaxed. Cuius's gaze softened. Creus stepped back from his shadowed vantage, all sensing that the time for patience and measured action had come. Zeus and his siblings advanced together, each step carrying the calm authority of beings who have seen centuries pass and understand the value of deliberate action. The plains were still. The air was heavy, yet not oppressive. The meeting of old Titans and the newly freed Olympians was a convergence of patience and purpose, of centuries of silence meeting centuries of anticipation. Here, in this calm and measured space, destiny began to take shape. The first subtle signs of understanding flickered in the Titans' eyes. The age of fear was drawing to a close, and the world, patient and enduring, waited for the next step, one that would shift power not with rage, but with the gentle, persistent certainty of those who act in harmony with time itself.
The Olympians and the Titans now faced one another on the wide plains. The sun hung low, casting a muted light that softened every shadow. There was no urgency, no clamor of battle, only the quiet weight of expectation, the kind that seems to settle into the earth itself, wrapping around every tree, hill, and stone. Time itself seemed to slow, holding its breath as the first deliberate step toward change unfolded. Zeus stood slightly ahead of his siblings, a calm figure among many. The lightning in his hand flickered softly, not as a threat, but as a reminder of potential, a reminder that power need not scream to exist. Hera and Hestia flanked him, radiating steadiness and warmth. Demeter's gentle life force flowed outward, softening the land, encouraging the balance that the world had long awaited. Poseidon's presence pulsed like the slow rhythm of tides, and Hades held the shadows of the earth in patient quiet. The Titans observed them in turn. Oceanus's gaze swept across the land with measured scrutiny, sensing currents and hidden depths. Cuius tilted his head slowly, absorbing the weight of thought and purpose in the Olympian's demeanor. Creus shifted carefully, not out of fear, but to maintain a position of patient observation. Even Hyperion, distant atop a ridge, let his fiery gaze settle, not with aggression, but with deliberate awareness. Zeus raised his hand once more, and his voice carried gently across the plains. We do not come to destroy. We do not seek dominance. We come to restore balance, to end the quiet tyranny of fear, and to allow the world to breathe again. A long pause followed. The wind stirred softly, brushing across the plains, lifting dust and grass in gentle eddies. The Titans considered his words. None spoke immediately, none moved hastily. Their vast forms seemed to absorb the meaning of the moment, as though every century of history had led them to this quiet exchange. Then Oceanus spoke, his voice low and resonant, like the rolling of distant tides. Balance, he murmured. After so long under fear, it is difficult to imagine a world shaped by calm and patience. Yes, Zeus replied softly. It is different from what you know.
but it is the path forward. The world does not need anger to guide it, nor force to maintain it. Patience and understanding will suffice. Coeus stepped forward, his movement slow and deliberate. "And if we resist?" he asked. His tone carried not threat, but genuine inquiry, a question born from the weight of time and the uncertainty of change. Hera stepped closer, her poise steady and commanding without harshness. "Resistance will always exist," she said quietly, "but it is less powerful than the quiet certainty of those aligned with purpose. We do not demand surrender. We seek recognition of what the world needs." The other Titans exchanged glances. They were not easily swayed, yet even they could sense the subtle shift in the air, the pulse of patience, the power of measured intent. For centuries, they had relied on fear. Now they felt something different, a quiet force that grew stronger the slower it moved, that became more powerful as it persisted without haste. Zeus extended his hand, palm upward, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. "Join us, not because you must, but because the world calls for cooperation, not conflict. The old ways may linger, but they will not endure without balance." Slowly, one by one, the Titans lowered their postures. Their shoulders eased, their gazes softened, and the vast tension that had lingered in the air for eons began to dissipate. Oceanus's hand moved toward his chest in a subtle acknowledgement. Coeus's brow relaxed. Creus and Hyperion exhaled slowly, a collective sigh that seemed to release centuries of unease. The plains, once heavy with quiet anticipation, now held a softer energy. The first step toward true harmony had been taken, not with shouts or weapons, but with patience, calm, and deliberate understanding. And Zeus, standing at the forefront with his siblings, felt the pulse of the world quicken slightly, a gentle, steady rhythm that promised the dawn of a new age, one shaped not by fear, but by the enduring certainty of those who act with purpose and restraint.
The plains remained quiet as Zeus and the Titans regarded one another. There were no loud declarations, no dramatic gestures, only the slow, careful understanding that had begun to bloom in the space between them. This was not the clash of forces, but the weaving of possibilities. Time itself seemed to pause, holding its breath as the first bonds of a new order were forged. Zeus lowered his hand, the soft flicker of lightning dimming to a gentle glow. "We can shape this world together," he said, his voice calm, measured, and steady. "Not as enemies, but as stewards of balance. The ages have tested us all, and yet here we are, at the cusp of something greater than fear or dominance." Oceanus shifted his stance, his immense form rippling like a slow, rolling tide. He see now that change does not require the violence of storms, but the persistence of currents. "I will join this purpose." Coeus nodded slowly, his thoughts measured. "Knowledge has always been my domain, yet wisdom is greater than knowledge alone. I recognize the value of patience, of steady guidance. I will align with this new order, not blindly, but with understanding." Cryos stepped forward, his shoulders easing from their ancient tension.
The old ways are familiar, but the world moves forward. I accept the path offered, and I shall act accordingly. Even Hyperion, the Titan of light, lowered his gaze and allowed a subtle acknowledgement. His presence, once sharp and distant, now carried the warmth of cooperation, a silent promise to respect the unfolding balance. Zeus exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in the plains dissolve like morning mist under the first rays of a gentle sun. "Then we are agreed," he said softly, "a pact not written in words alone, but in the actions we will take to protect and guide the world. Patience will be our measure. Harmony will be our aim." Hera, standing beside Zeus, extended her hand toward the Titans. Each of them responded in turn, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement rather than submission. The act was quiet, almost ceremonial, yet it carried a weight far greater than any loud decree. The pact was sealed in understanding, not fear, in calm intention, not threat. Rhea, who had observed silently from the edge of the plains, allowed herself a small, gentle smile. The prophecy had begun to unfold, but not as a story of destruction or revenge. It was a story of renewal, of careful guidance and measured strength. Her heart, heavy with centuries of worry, felt the lightening of long-buried burdens. Demeter touched the earth beneath her feet, feeling it respond to the quiet accord. Plants stirred subtly, life pulsing with a gentle rhythm, as if the very soil recognized the alignment of purpose. Hestia added her warmth, and the air itself seemed to settle, filling with calm reassurance that spread like a soft glow across the plains. Poseidon, holding his trident lightly, felt the currents of distant waters respond. Streams and rivers hummed with quiet acknowledgement, the hidden depths of oceans stirring subtly, as if to say, "We will follow, for the world seeks balance." Hades remained at the edge of shadows, the unseen places of the world resonating with the same understanding. Darkness need not be feared. It could guide, protect, and observe. His steady presence anchored the pact, ensuring that even the hidden and the overlooked had a role in this new harmony. Zeus looked at his siblings and then at the Titans. No words were needed beyond what had already been shared in silence, in measured steps, and in the quiet acknowledgement of purpose. The pact had been made not through haste or force, but through the patient alignment of hearts and minds. The sun dipped lower, painting the plains in muted gold and violet. The wind shifted slightly, carrying whispers of distant mountains, forests, and seas, the subtle song of a world beginning to move toward balance. And as the light softened, Zeus felt the quiet power of destiny unfold fully around him, a gentle certainty that the ages had long awaited, now ready to guide gods and mortals alike into a future shaped by calm, deliberate purpose.
With the pact quietly established, Zeus and his siblings turned their attention toward preparing for the next steps of their journey. The world, though aligned for balance, still bore remnants of the old ways, shadows of fear and inertia, slow currents of discord that had lingered through centuries. Their task was not to rush or destroy, but to guide, nurture, and stabilize. The siblings moved across the plains with deliberate care. Hestia's warmth filled the spaces they traversed, softening villages and homes they passed with the gentle reassurance of protection. People felt the subtle calm in her presence, a quiet sense that even the world's most uncertain corners could find stability. Mortals whispered blessings and quietly bowed their heads, sensing the slow, steady pulse of the divine walking among them. Demeter extended her hands to the fields and forests, coaxing the life within to grow patiently. Crops that had struggled under drought and neglect lifted subtly, leaves brushing against one another as if breathing again. Animals in the surrounding woods stirred, moving with a cautious, renewed rhythm, recognizing the hand of guidance that moved without hurry. Hera guided mortals and spirits alike, showing the importance of foresight and steady judgment. Her quiet counsel ensured that communities would act with wisdom, not panic, even in the face of change. The message was simple. Stability comes not from force, but from measured understanding. Poseidon walked along rivers and shores, tracing the paths of water in deliberate arcs. Streams, tides, and currents responded to him slowly, as if the oceans themselves were learning the rhythms of patience. He whispered to them, a gentle murmur carried on the wind, and the water seemed to flow with a renewed grace, guiding distant ships and the creatures beneath the surface without the violence of storms. Hades moved quietly among shadows and caverns, attending to the hidden places of the world. Darkness, often misunderstood and feared, became a subtle guide, a steady presence for those who dwelt in forgotten spaces. His work ensured that even the unseen corners of the earth were prepared for the changes that the Olympians and allied titans were guiding. Zeus coordinated the efforts with calm authority. He did not rush, but he moved with a deliberate awareness of time and consequence. Lightning flickered softly in his hands, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of potential, the stored energy of storms held in patient readiness, ready to be released only when necessary. In quiet moments, the siblings gathered atop hills, overlooking the lands they were guiding. The sun dipped slowly, and shadows stretched long across the valleys. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying whispers of distant mountains and rivers. The world itself seemed to pause, observing the deliberate preparation of these divine figures. They encountered minor pockets of resistance, spirits and beings still clinging to fear or pride, reluctant to embrace the careful order being offered. Zeus approached them with gentle words, calm presence, and subtle demonstrations of the new balance they sought. There were no threats, no displays of force, only the quiet certainty that the world could shift toward harmony if approached with patience. Slowly, the resistance waned. Those who opposed, not out of malice, but habit, began to understand. They followed the siblings not out of fear or obligation, but because the calm, measured approach offered a sense of stability long missing from the world. As the days passed, the Olympians and allied titans built a network of quiet guidance across the lands. Each step, each gesture, each soft word
carried the deliberate weight of ages, shaping the world not through haste, but through patient orchestration. By the time the sun began to fade into the muted violet of dusk, the siblings gathered once more. They looked across the lands they had touched, aware that the next stage of their journey would test the harmony they had so carefully cultivated. But for the first time in centuries, the world felt ready, not trembling under fear, but holding itself steady under the influence of calm, deliberate purpose. Zeus breathed slowly, feeling the pulse of the world deepen beneath his feet. He said softly, "The next step will come soon, but we are prepared, and in preparation, patience becomes power."
The siblings continued their measured journey across the lands, their steps deliberate, their presence calm and steady. Each day brought new opportunities to guide the world toward balance, and each evening offered moments of reflection. The sun dipped gently across the horizon, painting the skies with muted golds and purples, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch in harmony with the rhythm of the world. Hestia moved among the villages, her warmth spreading softly through homes and hearths. Even in the smallest cottages, she left a trace of comfort that settled like a gentle sigh. People felt the quiet reassurance, a sense that they were cared for, that stability was returning after centuries of uncertainty. Mothers held their children closer, farmers worked with a renewed steadiness, and the faintest smiles began to appear where tension had lingered. Demeter traveled through the forests and fields, her touch slow and deliberate. Crops lifted subtly, leaves unfurled more fully, and seeds long dormant stirred in the soil. Life pulsed gently in her presence, not with urgency, but with patience, following the rhythms she guided. Animals moved without fear, sensing the harmony she carried. The land seemed to breathe beneath her hands, responding to the patient nurturing that flowed from her very being. Hera observed quietly from hilltops and ridges, noting the patterns of the winds, the subtle signs of mortal activity, and the shifts in natural balance. Her gaze was measured, taking in the entire landscape at once. Her role was not to control, but to see, to understand, and to guide where intervention was needed. Her presence was a quiet reassurance that wisdom could govern as effectively as force. Poseidon followed the paths of rivers and oceans, moving with a patient awareness of currents and tides. Streams flowed more smoothly, carrying life and nourishment downstream, and the distant seas hummed softly in response to his steady guidance. Even the creatures of the deep stirred, recognizing the calm intention that shaped their environment. Poseidon's presence reminded the world that strength is not in chaos, but in measured influence over enduring forces. Hades moved through shadows and hidden places, unseen but not absent. He guided the world's quiet corners with patient care, ensuring that even the dark, forgotten spaces contributed to the balance they sought. Darkness was not opposition. It was a tool for clarity, a steadying influence for the unseen and the overlooked. Zeus walked among them all, the soft glow of lightning pulsing gently in his hands. He felt the weight of responsibility without being burdened by it, understanding that power is most enduring when tempered by patience. His gaze stretched to distant mountains, valleys, and forests, noting the subtle harmonies and dissonances in the world. Every decision was deliberate, every movement measured, as he guided the unfolding of events with calm authority. In the distance, they saw signs of the Titans who had yet to join their cause. Some lingered atop high peaks, cautious observers, hesitant to step into the harmony being quietly established. Others moved through valleys, shadows in motion,
feeling the pulse of patience in the land below. Zeus signaled to his siblings, and together they approached the hesitant Titans with gentle presence and soft words. There were no threats, no demands, only the invitation to align with the rhythm of balance. The world itself seemed to respond. Breezes carried their voices, rivers whispered guidance, and the earth beneath their feet shifted subtly to support the meeting. Slowly, one by one, the hesitant Titans responded. They did not rush, they did not yield blindly. They moved with deliberate caution, testing the calm certainty offered by the Olympians. And each time they found that patience and understanding held more power than fear or force ever could. By the time twilight settled across the lands, the group had grown. Titans and Olympians moved together, not as conquerors and subjects, but as partners in a careful orchestration of balance. The world felt steadier under their influence, as if the long, slow work of guiding fate had begun to take hold. Zeus looked to his siblings, feeling the quiet satisfaction of progress. The world bends not to force, but to purpose sustained over time. Our path is steady. Our strength is patience. The night fell gently, stars emerging one by one, and the calm march of order continued, silent, deliberate, and enduring.
The calm that had spread across the world was not absolute. In hidden corners, in the deep shadows of mountains and forests, remnants of fear and doubt lingered. Some Titans had joined the pact willingly, guided by understanding and patience, but others still hesitated, bound by centuries of habit and the echoes of old conflicts. The quiet harmony the Olympians had established faced its first subtle test. Zeus walked at the forefront of his siblings, sensing the faint tremors in the air, not of storm or violence, but of lingering resistance. His lightning remained dormant, a soft glow pulsing like a heartbeat in his hand, a reminder of the power held in restraint. "The world has begun to listen," he said softly. "But some hearts still cling to fear. We will not force them. We will guide them, and only patience can succeed where anger fails." Hera's gaze swept across the distant peaks, noting the faint shadows of Titans who had not yet fully committed. Their forms were immense, their postures tense, yet they remained curious, cautiously observing the progress of the Olympians. Hera's presence radiated calm authority, and she stepped forward with deliberate poise. "We do not demand submission. We offer clarity, and in clarity, resistance often dissolves naturally." Poseidon moved along a river winding through the valley, sensing the currents of uncertainty. Even water meets resistance, yet it finds its path over time. He said, "We are like water now, steady and persistent. Let the currents guide those who hesitate." Demeter extended her hands to the forests below, coaxing life to flourish quietly, subtly, in places long neglected. Every leaf, every blade of grass seemed to shimmer with a faint reminder that growth persists even in the shadows. The Titans, lingering in the mountains, seeing the steady pulse of life restored below, felt the quiet shift in the world around them. Hades moved silently through the shadows, unseen but deeply aware. He watched as the hesitant Titans considered the Olympians' approach. Fear and pride were present, yet not overpowering. His calm, patient presence acted as a subtle anchor, a reminder that the unseen and forgotten can guide as much as the visible. Hestia moved among the scattered villages, her warmth extending gently to those who had long lived under the shadow of uncertainty. Hearths glowed softly where she passed, fires lit not by demand but by her subtle influence. Mortals felt her presence as comfort, not compulsion, and in turn, the land seemed to reflect the steadiness of her care. Zeus signaled to his siblings, and together they approached the first hesitant group of Titans. These were figures who had long relied on fear to shape their actions, cautious and wary of any new order. But the Olympians did not approach with aggression. They did not demand allegiance or obedience. They moved with calm certainty, their presence deliberate, measured, and persistent. Oceanus, Coeus, and Creus observed from the side, guiding the hesitant Titans through quiet example. Even the few who had doubts felt the pull of purpose and clarity, the steady rhythm of intention that did not waver. Slowly, the Titans began to align, not out of fear, but out of understanding. The first subtle confrontation passed without conflict. There were no loud clashes, no roars of lightning or power, only the quiet movement of minds and hearts toward understanding. Resistance was met not with force, but with patience, and in that patience, strength grew. By the time night fell over the valley, the Olympians and their allies had established a subtle network of balance. The world itself seemed to breathe more freely, responding to the quiet guidance of those who understood that true power is measured in restraint, not aggression. Zeus gazed at the stars emerging above the horizon. He said softly, "The first test is behind us, but this is only the beginning. Patience will carry us forward, and in patience, the world will find balance."
The next morning dawned gently, the sun spilling soft light across valleys and forests. No harsh rays, no blinding glare, only the warm, steady illumination that mirrored the calm resolve of Zeus and his siblings. The world, still responsive to their presence, seemed to hum softly under the rhythm of their measured steps. The first test of resistance had passed, but the journey toward true balance required more than initial success. It required cohesion, patience, and unity. Zeus gathered his siblings atop a gentle rise overlooking the plains. His expression was calm, his voice low but steady. The world is listening now, but it is fragile. Those who hesitate may still sway others who have yet to understand. Our strength lies not in force, but in moving as one, deliberate, steady, unshakable. Hera stepped forward, her presence commanding yet serene. "Unity does not come from conformity," she said softly. "It comes from shared purpose, from alignment of intent, and from patience with those who still struggle to see." Poseidon's gaze extended to the rivers below. Currents that flow together shape the land more gently than any storm. We must move as the waters, steady and persistent, guiding the hesitant without forcing them. Demeter extended her hands to the fields that stretched below. Crops stirred subtly in response to her energy, leaves brushing together like soft whispers. Life itself seemed to respond to the harmony that the siblings projected, reinforcing the quiet strength of unity.
Hestia moved among the villages dotting the plains, allowing her warmth to settle in homes and hearths. Each family that felt her presence experienced the same steady reassurance, a soft reminder that patience and care can provide as much protection as force ever could. Hades remained in the shadows at the edges of the valleys, ensuring that even the unseen corners of the world were aligned. Darkness, when guided by purpose, became a tool of understanding rather than fear. His steady observation allowed the siblings to operate in confidence, knowing that no part of the world, visible or hidden, would be left unbalanced. As the day progressed, the Olympians began to move in quiet formation, subtly demonstrating their unity. Even those titans who had once resisted took notice, sensing the deliberate cohesion and calm authority that flowed among the siblings. The hesitant titans observed without provocation, their pride tempered by the steady rhythm of the Olympians' actions. In one small valley, a group of mortals had gathered, drawn by the subtle pulse of change that the gods emanated. They watched quietly, their movements careful, and listened to the words of the Olympians. No commands were given, no threats were made. Instead, a gentle, pervasive reassurance radiated outward, allowing the mortals to align themselves with the new order on their own terms. Zeus approached the edge of the valley, holding his lightning calmly in his hand. Strength is not loud. It is measured, deliberate, and enduring. The world changes not in haste, but in steady, patient steps. The hesitant titans, seeing the quiet influence the Olympians held over both mortals and the land itself, began to shift. Their postures relaxed, their eyes softened, and slowly they joined the movement, not from obligation, but from understanding. By evening, the unity of purpose had grown perceptibly. Titans who had once resisted now aligned their actions with those of the Olympians, creating a pattern of harmony that rippled outward across the plains. Even the land responded. Rivers flowed more smoothly, forests shifted subtly with the wind, and the air itself seemed lighter, carrying a soft hum of anticipation and calm. Zeus turned to his siblings, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "We move forward together," he said, "not with force, but with purpose, not with haste, but with patience. This is how balance endures." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in muted shades of violet and gold, and the siblings continued their journey, united, deliberate, and quietly powerful, carrying the steady pulse of the world with them as they walked into the night.
Even as the Olympians and their allied titans moved steadily across the lands, traces of the old fear lingered, not in open defiance, but in subtle echoes. A forest that seemed slower to bloom, a river hesitant in its current, a village where the hearths burned dimly. These were remnants of centuries shaped by apprehension and mistrust, the quiet shadows of power misused. The siblings knew that patience alone would not erase them. They required attention, guidance, and the enduring strength of presence. Zeus moved at the forefront, observing the faint tremors of unease. Lightning pulsed gently in his palm, a soft rhythmic glow that mirrored the careful cadence of his thoughts. "The world remembers fear," he said softly to his siblings. "It lingers quietly, like shadows at the edges of light. We cannot rush its departure. We must guide it steadily, without haste.
Hera's gaze swept across the valleys, noting the subtle signs of lingering apprehension. Her presence radiated calm authority, a quiet suggestion that hesitation need not be met with aggression. Even shadows obey patience. We must move deliberately through them, showing that balance is enduring, not fleeting. Hestia moved among scattered villages, her warmth spreading softly. She approached homes where fear had long settled like dust, allowing her presence to illuminate the quiet corners. Mortals felt reassurance that was almost tangible, a steady sense that the world, at last, offered safety through patience rather than through dominance. Demeter extended her hands across the fields and forests, coaxing the life within to grow at a measured pace. Leaves unfurled slowly, crops lifted gently, and seeds that had long lain dormant began to stir. Even animals moved with a subtle rhythm, their instincts aligned to the calm pulse radiating from the Olympians and Titans alike. Poseidon's presence flowed along rivers and streams, tracing the hidden currents of water that had stagnated under centuries of imbalance. The liquid paths responded, moving with subtle grace, carrying nourishment and vitality across the lands. The Titan of the seas whispered gently to the waves, not commanding them, but reminding them of their inherent purpose and steady power. Hades moved silently among the shadows, ensuring that even the hidden and unseen places of the world remained aligned. Darkness, often feared as a symbol of danger, became instead a guide for balance, a quiet presence that reinforced the order the Olympians and Titans were quietly establishing. As they approached a particularly stubborn forest where the shadows of fear clung tightly, Zeus signaled to his siblings. They approached without haste, their movements slow and deliberate, forming a circle around the ancient grove. Lightning flickered gently in Zeus's hand, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of focus and potential, a reminder that energy can be directed without force. The hesitant Titans, watching closely, mirrored the Olympians' careful approach. Oceanus, Coeus, and Creos remained at the edges, guiding the shadows with subtle gestures, their vast presence reinforcing the calm authority of the group. Even Hyperion's light softened, bathing the forest in a warm, steady glow that encouraged growth rather than fear. Zeus knelt in the center of the grove, placing his hand on the earth. The pulse of patience traveled through the soil, reaching the roots of the trees and the hidden streams beneath. Hestia, Demeter, and Hera added their energies, weaving warmth, life, and wisdom together into a slow, deliberate current. Poseidon and Hades contributed from water and shadow, guiding the natural forces to align quietly. One by one, the lingering shadows lifted. Fear did not vanish in an instant, but it softened, receding like morning mist under the rising sun. The forest seemed to breathe again, the leaves whispering gently in response to the calm presence that had entered their midst. Zeus rose slowly, looking to his siblings. "Even the oldest shadows can be guided," he said softly. "Our strength is not in eradicating fear through force, but in transforming it with patience and purpose." The siblings continued their march, step by deliberate step, knowing that each movement strengthened the quiet foundation of balance. The world responded subtly, imperceptibly, yet undeniably, to the steady rhythm they set. And as night fell, a soft glow of calm stretched across the lands, a quiet reminder that even lingering fear can yield to patience, and even shadows can become guides when approached with steady care.
The next day brought a gentle mist that lingered over the hills and valleys. The Olympians and their allied Titans moved steadily, each step deliberate, each gesture infused with quiet purpose. The land itself seemed to welcome their presence, the soil soft underfoot, rivers humming in gentle currents, and trees swaying subtly in rhythm with the calm cadence of their passage. Yet they knew that the path to balance required more than their own strength. Wisdom from ages past must guide them as well. Zeus paused at the edge of a hidden ravine, a place untouched by mortal footsteps for centuries. The wind moved softly through the rocks, carrying faint echoes of voices long gone. "The world has memory," he said quietly. "It holds the lessons of those who came before us. We must listen, not just act, if we are to guide it properly." Hera nodded, her eyes scanning the ancient stones. "Patience is not simply waiting," she said softly. "It is learning, understanding, and integrating what has been forgotten or overlooked. Even the most subtle lessons can shape the future." Hestia knelt by a cluster of ancient roots that had grown intertwined over centuries. She traced her fingers along the soil, feeling the quiet pulse of life beneath her hands. "Even in decay there is guidance," she murmured. "Growth emerges from patience, from care, from understanding what has been neglected." Hestia walked slowly among the stones, her warmth flowing into the quiet corners, illuminating hidden paths that had been lost in shadow. Mortals might never notice the guidance, yet her presence reinforced the stability and safety of the world around them. Her influence reminded all that home and hearth are the quiet foundations upon which endurance rests. Poseidon listened to the subtle movement of water trickling from hidden springs, tracing currents long buried beneath layers of earth. He whispered softly, coaxing the streams into gentle motion, teaching them to flow with purpose rather than force. Even the tiniest ripple carried lessons of patience, persistence, and direction. Hades, blending with shadows, observed the interplay of light and dark in the ravine. He sensed the stories etched into the stones, the quiet record of time itself. Darkness, when understood, was not an enemy of growth, but a companion to it. His presence ensured that even the unseen corners of the world contributed to the shaping of balance. Zeus and his siblings began to gather the lessons, each in their own way. Lightning was shaped to flow with deliberate energy, not sudden strike. Rivers were guided to carry nourishment without turbulence. Crops and forests were coaxed to grow steadily, quietly absorbing sunlight and rain. Even the shadows of mountains were observed, recognized for their subtle influence over weather, wildlife, and the movement of time. The Titans who followed them observed carefully. Oceanus traced the hidden channels of rivers, noting the soft patterns of flow. Coeus studied the ancient stones and inscriptions, absorbing the wisdom encoded in ages past. Crius and Hyperion moved with measured observation, their understanding deepening as they saw the steady orchestration of guidance that did not rely on force. Zeus raised his hand and spoke softly to the group. "Power alone is fleeting. Endurance comes from knowledge, from understanding, and from the deliberate shaping of what exists. Every shadow, every stream, every seed carries wisdom if we take the time to observe it." As they moved through the ravine, a faint glow began to settle over the land. It was not fire or lightning, but the quiet illumination of awareness, a subtle reminder that patience combined with understanding yields clarity. The shadows of old fear, already softened by earlier guidance, now held the faint traces of insight, recognizing the value of careful stewardship over blind force. By nightfall, the siblings had integrated the lessons of the ancient world into their journey. Each step they took was informed by history, each gesture a reflection of understanding, each presence a reinforcement of balance. The land beneath their feet was not just shaped by their power, but by the wisdom of centuries, flowing quietly through time. Zeus looked across the ravine at his siblings, a gentle satisfaction in his gaze. He said softly, "We have learned from the past. Now we must carry this wisdom forward, not in haste, but in careful, enduring guidance. The world will respond to patience more than to force." The stars emerged softly above, mirrored by the faint glimmer of rivers and the subtle luminescence of life in the forest. And the Olympians, steady and deliberate, continued their journey, carrying the quiet lessons of the ancient ones as they moved into the next stage of their mission.
The next day brought a gentle mist that lingered over the hills and valleys. The Olympians and their allied Titans moved steadily, each step deliberate, each gesture infused with quiet purpose. The land itself seemed to welcome their presence, the soil soft underfoot, rivers humming in gentle currents, and trees swaying subtly in rhythm with the calm cadence of their passage. Yet they knew that the path to balance required more than their own strength. Wisdom from ages past must guide them as well. Zeus paused at the edge of a hidden ravine, a place untouched by mortal footsteps for centuries. The wind moved softly through the rocks, carrying faint echoes of voices long gone. "The world has memory," he said quietly. "It holds the lessons of those who came before us. We must listen, not just act, if we are to guide it properly." Hera nodded, her eyes scanning the ancient stones. "Patience is not simply waiting," she said softly. "It is learning, understanding, and integrating what has been forgotten or overlooked. Even the most subtle lessons can shape the future." Demeter knelt by a cluster of ancient roots that had grown intertwined over centuries. She traced her fingers along the soil, feeling the quiet pulse of life beneath her hands. "Even in decay, there is guidance," she murmured. "Growth emerges from patience, from care, from understanding what has been neglected." Hestia walked slowly among the stones, her warmth flowing into the quiet corners, illuminating hidden paths that had been lost in shadow. Mortals might never notice the guidance, yet her presence reinforced the stability and safety of the world around them. Her influence reminded all that home and hearth are the quiet foundations upon which endurance rests. Poseidon listened to the subtle movement of water trickling from hidden springs, tracing currents long buried beneath layers of earth. He whispered softly, coaxing the streams into gentle motion, teaching them to flow with purpose rather than force. Even the tiniest ripple carried lessons of patience, persistence, and direction. Hades, blending with shadows, observed the interplay of light and dark in the ravine. He sensed the stories etched into the stones, the quiet record of time itself. Darkness, when understood, was not an enemy of growth, but a companion to it. His presence ensured that even the unseen corners of the world contributed to the shaping of balance. Zeus and his siblings began to gather the lessons, each in their own way. Lightning was shaped to flow with deliberate energy, not sudden strike. Rivers were guided to carry nourishment without turbulence. Crops and forests were coaxed to grow steadily, quietly absorbing sunlight and rain. Even the shadows of mountains were observed, recognized for their subtle influence over weather, wildlife, and the movement of time. The Titans who followed them observed carefully. Oceanus traced the hidden channels of rivers, noting the soft patterns of flow. Coeus studied the ancient stones and inscriptions, absorbing the wisdom encoded in ages past. Creus and Hyperion moved with measured observation, their understanding deepening as they saw the steady orchestration of guidance that did not rely on force. Zeus raised his hand and spoke softly to the group. Power alone is fleeting. Endurance comes from knowledge, from understanding, and from the deliberate shaping of what exists. Every shadow, every stream, every seed carries wisdom if we take the time to observe it. As they moved through the ravine, a faint glow began to settle over the land. It was not fire or lightning, but the quiet illumination of awareness, a subtle reminder that patience combined with understanding yields clarity. The shadows of old fear, already softened by earlier guidance, now held the faint traces of insight, recognizing the value of careful stewardship over blinding force. By nightfall, the siblings had integrated the lessons of the ancient world into their journey. Each step they took was informed by history, each gesture a reflection of understanding, each presence a reinforcement of balance. The land beneath their feet was not just shaped by their power, but by the wisdom of centuries flowing quietly through time. Zeus looked across the ravine at his siblings, a gentle satisfaction in his gaze. "We have learned from the past," he said softly. "Now we must carry this wisdom forward, not in haste, but in careful, enduring guidance. The world will respond to patience more than to force." The stars emerged softly above, mirrored by the faint glimmer of rivers and the subtle luminescence of life in the forest. And the Olympians, steady and deliberate, continued their journey, carrying the quiet lessons of the ancient ones as they moved into the next stage of their mission.
The following days passed with quiet rhythm. Zeus and his siblings moved steadily across the lands, each step deliberate, each gesture imbued with careful intention. Their presence was felt everywhere, in the gentle sway of trees, in the steady flow of rivers, in the subtle stirring of fields long untouched. Even the skies seemed calmer, clouds moving in a soft, ordered dance that mirrored the measured rhythm of their journey. Hestia walked among villages, her warmth extending quietly into the homes and hearts of mortals. Families felt a gentle reassurance, subtle but enduring, that their lives were observed and protected, not by fear, but by the calm constancy of presence. Hearths burned steadily where uncertainty had once lingered, and the rhythm of daily life resumed with a newfound stability. Demeter moved through the forests and farmlands, coaxing life gently. Trees stretched, leaves unfolded with deliberate care, and crops grew in quiet abundance. Every creature, from the smallest insect to the largest deer,
responded to the slow pulse of nurturing that flowed from her hands. The earth, long subdued by fear and neglect, now seemed to exhale, releasing centuries of tension in tiny, imperceptible sighs. Poseidon traced hidden streams and rivers, guiding currents with subtle gestures. Water flowed with renewed grace, finding its way through previously stagnant channels. Fish and other aquatic life moved with ease, their habits returning to patterns of natural balance. Even the distant seas pulsed softly, a quiet acknowledgement of the steady rhythm being established across the lands. Hades moved in the shadows, ensuring that even the unseen corners of the world were aligned. Darkness was no longer an obstacle, but a guide, a patient observer of the changes unfolding in light and life. The unseen, often overlooked, now played a vital role in the harmonious flow that the Olympians sought to establish. Zeus, at the forefront, observed the gradual convergence of all forces. Lightning glimmered softly in his hand, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of potential restrained, energy poised and patient. "The world is responding," he murmured to his siblings. "Harmony grows not through force, but through quiet alignment. Every step we take, deliberate and calm, strengthens it." The Titans who had joined them were now fully engaged, their immense presences adding weight to the growing harmony. Oceanus guided waters with quiet patience. Coeus traced hidden patterns of thought and insight. And Creus observed the slow shifts of the land, each reinforcing the deliberate rhythm set by the Olympians. Hyperion's light softened, spreading warmth rather than intensity, and even the more hesitant Titans began to sense the strength inherent in calm unity. As the days passed, villages, forests, rivers, and mountains all seemed to pulse with the quiet energy of alignment. Mortals felt subtle reassurance. Titans responded with measured movements, and the very earth carried the lingering echo of careful orchestration. Each gesture, each step, each deliberate act of guidance contributed to the rising harmony that now extended across the lands. In one valley, a group of hesitant Titans gathered, observing the steady influence of the Olympians over both mortals and nature. They spoke softly among themselves, recognizing the enduring power of patience, the authority of presence, and the quiet strength of deliberate action. One by one, they aligned, not because they were commanded, but because the harmony itself invited participation. Zeus looked over the plains, a gentle satisfaction settling across his features. "The world is learning the rhythm of patience," he said softly. "Even those who once clung to fear now follow willingly, guided not by force, but by understanding. This is the true power of harmony." As twilight descended, a muted glow spread across the valleys and forests. Stars appeared in the sky, mirrored by the subtle shimmer of rivers and the quiet luminescence of life all around. The rising harmony was now unmistakable, a gentle yet enduring force shaping the world with every heartbeat, every step, every deliberate gesture of those who had committed themselves to patience, purpose, and unity.
As the sun rose gently over the horizon, the world seemed quieter, steadier, more harmonious. The efforts of the Olympians and their allied titans had begun to resonate throughout the land. Mountains, rivers, forests, and plains moved subtly in alignment, guided not by fear or force, but by the calm, deliberate rhythm established by those who had dedicated themselves to patient stewardship. Zeus stood at the crest of a hill, observing the valley below. Lightning flickered softly in his hand, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of potential, restrained, deliberate, and poised. "The world responds to calm guidance," he said softly to his siblings. "Where once there was fear, there is now understanding. Where once there was chaos, there is now balance. This is the strength of patience." Hera walked among the villages, her gaze steady, her presence comforting. Families went about their daily lives with renewed assurance. Hearths glowed warmly, children played under watchful, gentle eyes, and the rhythm of daily life flowed naturally, uninterrupted by uncertainty. Her influence reminded mortals that true stability comes not from domination, but from quiet guidance and care. Hestia moved through the homes, extending warmth and reassurance. Even those who had felt the lingering shadows of fear now relaxed into the gentle steadiness of life under her influence. She whispered quietly to the earth beneath her feet, reminding it that patience shapes stability more enduringly than power ever could. Demeter traced her hands through fields and forests, coaxing growth and vitality from every leaf, every root, every seed. Crops rose steadily, animals moved with grace, and even the smallest insects felt the rhythm of harmony flowing through the land. Life itself seemed to pulse in alignment with the Olympians' steady hand, a subtle but undeniable acknowledgement of guidance without force. Poseidon traced hidden rivers and streams, coaxing water into patterns of nourishment and balance. Currents flowed smoothly, carrying vitality to every corner of the land. Fish moved steadily, rivers whispered along their banks, and even the distant seas hummed quietly, reflecting the harmony that now extended across the world. Hades moved through shadows and hidden places, ensuring that even the unseen corners of the earth supported the emerging balance. Darkness became a quiet ally, a companion to light and life rather than an obstacle. Where shadows lingered, they now guided subtly, reinforcing the deliberate rhythm set by the Olympians. The Titans who had joined the cause mirrored this alignment, their immense forms moving deliberately, reflecting the patient unity of the Olympians. Oceanus guided waters with calm authority. Coeus observed and interpreted subtle patterns of thought and history. Creus reinforced the movement of the land, and Hyperion's light softened into gentle warmth, illuminating without dominance. Even the Titans who had once resisted now moved in subtle harmony. They observed the quiet influence over mortals, forests, rivers, and the very soil itself, and they began to adopt the rhythm, not because they were compelled, but because they recognized the enduring strength in deliberate patience. By midday, the lands reflected this alignment. Valleys flowed with life, mountains held steady, forests whispered in gentle unity, and rivers moved with deliberate grace. Mortals, sensing the calm authority, acted with measured understanding, carrying forward the lessons of patience and steady guidance. The world itself seemed to exhale, a collective acknowledgement of the balance now spreading, quietly, yet undeniably, across every corner.
Zeus raised his gaze to the sky, the soft flicker of lightning in his hand mirroring the calm pulse of the world beneath him. He said softly, "This is what we sought, the world in balance, not through domination, not through fear, but through patience, understanding, and steady purpose. This is the enduring power of harmony." The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the world in muted gold and violet. Rivers shimmered, leaves rustled gently, and the quiet hum of life carried across the valleys. Balance had been achieved, subtly yet undeniably, as the Olympians and Titans continued their careful guidance, ensuring that the world would endure in steady, harmonious alignment for generations to come.
As twilight spread across the lands, the Olympians and their allied Titans gathered atop a gentle hill overlooking valleys, rivers, and forests, now humming in quiet unity. The air was still, yet alive, carrying the subtle rhythm of life that had been guided and nurtured with deliberate care. The world itself seemed to pause, absorbing the calm authority that flowed through every being, every stone, every stream. Zeus stood at the forefront, lightning dimly flickering in his hand, a gentle pulse in time with the heartbeat of the land. "The work we began has reached its culmination," he said softly, his voice carrying across the plains. "Not through war, not through fear, not through haste, but through patient guidance, understanding, and unity. The world now breathes in harmony." Hera looked over the villages, forests, and rivers with quiet satisfaction. "The path was not easy," she said, "but we have taught the world to move with patience. The balance we've established is not fragile, for it is built upon deliberate care and steady intention, supported by all who walk, swim, and grow upon this earth." Demeter knelt among a field of growing crops, her hands brushing through the leaves. The plants swayed gently in response, nourished not only by sunlight and rain, but by the persistent presence of guidance and care. "Life itself remembers patience," she murmured. "It flows steadily when nurtured with purpose and understanding." Hestia moved among the homes and villages, ensuring that every hearth reflected calm warmth. Families rested peacefully, children slept without fear, and mortals felt, without fully knowing why, that they were safe, guided by unseen hands that moved with quiet authority. "Even in small spaces," she said, "harmony begins with the gentle touch of care." Poseidon traced rivers to distant seas, ensuring that currents flowed steadily, carrying sustenance and life to every corner. The water responded with grace, shimmering in the twilight as though acknowledging the enduring influence of those who guided it. Fish moved calmly, and tides moved with purpose, and the seas themselves pulsed gently in quiet rhythm. Hades, blending with shadows, observed the world from the unseen places. Darkness no longer represented fear, but understanding and presence. Even the hidden corners of the world now participated in balance, subtle guides complementing the work of light and life. What was once feared has become a quiet companion, reinforcing harmony rather than opposing it. The Titans who had joined the cause now moved as one with the Olympians. Oceanus guided waters, Coeus observed patterns and knowledge,
Creus reflected the land's enduring strength, and Hyperion's light spread softly, illuminating without blinding. Even the hesitant ones who had once clung to doubt now participated in quiet cooperation, recognizing that strength lies in steady unity, not in resistance. Zeus raised his gaze to the stars emerging above, their light mirrored by the faint shimmer of rivers, forests, and fields below. "Harmony is not a moment," he said softly, "but a continuous effort, an enduring practice. The world will remember this rhythm, guided by patience, purpose, and care." The siblings stood together, their presence a silent beacon across the lands. Twilight deepened into night, stars glimmered like distant fires, and the world settled into a state of enduring calm. Every stream, every tree, every creature, and every mortal carried within them the subtle pulse of balance, flowing steadily and silently across generations to come. Zeus exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of eternity without burden. He said, "We have shaped not just the land, but the very rhythm of life itself. This is the eternal calm, not imposed, not demanded, but carefully nurtured and enduring forever in quiet harmony." The wind whispered softly through the valleys, rivers gleamed under the starlight, and forests rustled with gentle acknowledgement. The Olympians and Titans remained vigilant yet patient, knowing that the world had been guided into a balance that would endure. And in that calm, every heartbeat of the land, every whisper of life, carried the quiet, eternal legacy of harmony, the patient triumph of purpose over chaos, and the gentle, enduring power of unity.